Good morning, and it is the 9 o'clock hour on the 3rd of November, 2020. This is a special meeting of the Police Services Board. We do have a quorum in place. I do ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, the general nature thereof. Seeing none, the first item of business, the agenda should be on your blotter or desk before you. We should really look at the minutes that were of the June 4th meeting between the staff and the PSB and the OPP, and see if there's anything that pops out at you from those minutes. If not, we'll just accept them as they are presented. So done. So the intent this morning is to have a preliminary discussion amongst ourselves. The OPP are not present this morning. However, they do have a copy of exactly what you have a copy of. And they would, if needed, present any of their concerns or questions, comments through the chair, and then those would be distributed to you. This is a prelude to a meeting of the PSB with staff of bylaw on the 9th of November again, and that is will be attended by the clerk as well, I'm informed, given that internal structuring will take place as of January 1st, so I'm informed. The clerk will assume responsibility for that division of the Corporation of Norfolk County. So the expectation is Ms. Budis, the acting supervisor for bylaw, Jim Milson, anyone else they wish to invite to the meeting, ourselves, of course, and the Ontario Provincial Police. And that would sort of account for all of those who would be in attendance. You have copies of both bylaws that were provided to you. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to read through them. These are the two bylaws that Jim Milson, acting supervisor for bylaw, has provided that through whatever process internally to Norfolk County, they have decided they wish to have the OPP enforce either in whole or in part going forward. And certainly, as everyone becomes more comfortable with the process, then there may be some added to that. It's understandable that operations do create opportunities. Certainly when we look at both bylaws, a number of questions, comments, observations do pop out, certainly in my mind. However, before I get to my list, we'll certainly go around the table. So let me just start by asking the members, if you have a comment you wish to make or a question you want to pose, Owen will track all of those so that the minutes of this meeting will then be sent to everyone for review and correction as needed. So does anyone around the table want to make a comment or have a question they wish to pose? Member Van Hugen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it's my first time, I was just trying to get a clear understanding of the process that we're going through now. Is part of this in order for both bylaw officers and the police force to get a clear understanding of responsibilities? Is that let's say, the simple overview of what we're trying to brainstorm through?
Yes, the strategic direction here is going back to June.
Yeah.
The police will get a call whether it's a barking dog or a wild animal or some other incident, some noise on a Sunday, the neighbors revving up their motorbike, and the other neighbor doesn't like it, those kinds of things. And because the county bylaw does not or did not work weekends, holidays, and after a certain time in the day, the OPP took it upon themselves to respond to a lot of those things. However, none of that is written into the contract. In fact, it's pretty emphatic. OPP will not enforce municipal bylaws unless there's an agreement.
Okay.
So we want to clarify that situation. So hopefully the outcome of this will be that once we clarify which portions of bylaws Norfolk County wishes to have the OPP enforce, and when, that type of thing, then that will be enshrined in some sort of a codicil or attachment to the contract. And the council will approve it, hopefully, and then the PSB will accept it, and we'll let the municipal policing bureau, through our local detachment, know what's going on in this regard. So the contract will be amended accordingly.
So it's pivotal to have great cooperation when it comes to these bylaws between, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you see from the monthly stats that we get and statistics that are recorded, and you look at them and say, well, wait, why are the police responding to these things when it's not in the contract? It becomes a call for service, and a call for service is about $200. So is it financially the best decision to make, to have a armed, uniformed officer respond to what historically, not now, but was historically barking dogs, those kinds of things, at $150,000 approximately, all up for an officer? Is it a good use of their time, effort, training, those types of things? It may well be. We'll see. Okay. Mr. Santos, then Mr. Columbus.
So, Mr. Chair, my question is, so what we're looking at is the noise bylaw, parking, and so my question also is the cannabis. So when I think of bylaw, I think of government hours. I'm thinking 9 till 5. So if we have a problem with noise, parking, or issues with cannabis, is the County of Norfolk still looking at 9 till 5 government hours? Because we have to be realistic here. Policing, 24/7. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, certainly the decision of the work hours of municipal staff is going to be determined through the general managers to council, and that'll be decided. And as far as cannabis goes, the OPP at the moment, because we don't have a bylaw on cannabis enforcement, and anything to do with the role of Mr. DeBath. But certainly if the OPP, our police force, is requested to attend, to support, and provide safety and security to a bylaw officer, absolutely they get it, and they will get it. Okay?
Just to add to that, Mr. Chair, I mean, my question basically becomes is, we've got one bylaw enforcement officer for cannabis.
To be clear, the county has one bylaw officer.
Correct, yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chair. And so my question here is, if this seems to be an important issue, and has been for a number of months, so the 9 till 5 is my question, Mr. Chair. Even though we have 24/7 hour policing, to have the police involved at this point in time, there's a process that Mr. DeBath has to go through.
Yeah, and I don't want the PSB to delve too deeply into the operations of the county at all. Their decision as to the hours chosen, who enforces what. Part of the outcome of the discussion at the last meeting was around, well, it's not just simply Mr. DeBath or that one officer, because you do get call-outs for clean yard bylaw. You get call-outs for a lot of things that this council and previous councils have passed as bylaws. So there are a number of bylaw officers that do go out, including, in addition to The fire inspectors have full authority to enter properties, as do the building inspectors. So it's a much broader approach, but that's on their side of the fence, and I don't want to intrude on that. We can raise the question on the 9th, you know. Can we bring some clarity if need be, or how do you see us working together on that issue? That's the objective here. You wanted to say something, Madam Mayor? No? Okay, Mr. Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too had suggested, we've got noise and parking issues. Somebody mentioned cannabis. And there's also these watercraft, the water sea-doos, I guess it is, comes to mind, that we had some difficulty over. But
And just to be clear, sir, and we've had a chat about the watercraft, and the mayor and I have had that chat. When they're on the water, it's not the local detachment that deals with that. That's a provincial body, the Marine Unit.
I know I realize that, but I fully understand too that Mr. Milson had his plate full at one time with all those requests. And whether it's 9 to 5, like George mentions, or 8:30 to 4:30, I think that is the key to get that resolved, and it's probably going to mean some negotiation with staffing complement and that type of thing. Because that's when we're getting the problems, is after hours.
Yeah, I see your hand. Again, I really don't want the PSB to intrude too deeply on the other side. We can ask the question, or we can make the observation or the comment, but to be very clear, the Marine Unit is not under the PSB, is not under the local detachment commander. It's a provincial unit. Certainly, and I've been assured by the inspector and the staff sergeants that if there's a call on land dealing with any issue in Norfolk County, they will go. At 911 call comes in, they will go, and they'll deal with it, and they have dealt with it in the past. If the call comes in 911 for activity on the water, whether it's Poda Hawk, whether it's normal operations on the water, whether it's a company that is renting out vehicles of some sort or vessels of some sort, then that's the Marine Unit, and the 911 dispatcher will make sure that it gets through.
The situation that I totally recall that I was involved with was in Port Dover, when they had the watercraft there, and they were actually illegal fueling of the watercraft. It was on land, actually, where this took place. So it's a gray area, I guess, where that division is.
Yeah, once again, a lot of discussion around that topic, and the illegal refueling of vessels was reported and was dealt with. However, once again, you got to look at another body of the provincial government that mandates and controls and investigates those types of things. So there are many other players, not the least being the Coast Guard and others that regulate operations on water. But again, we can raise that question. It's noted, and we'll see where the Norfolk County staff and council wish to go on that matter. Madam Mayor, I saw your hand a couple of.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to Mr. Santos's comments. You know, you just commented you don't want to intrude too deeply into county operations, but to be fair, you do enjoy criticizing county operations online quite often. And so I'm just wondering, we often hear of your previous experience here in your 2 terms as mayor and so on. Why did bylaw never work weekends or in the evenings? Because when I started, it was quite interesting. The reason they don't work weekends and evenings now, or until at least the pandemic came along, and because of the Emergency Act, we were able to restructure some things. However, I believe there's still some QP grievances on the table with that currently. But the QP deal that prohibits, or restricts rather, bylaw officers from working weekends has been in existence for many years, in fact, through your time as mayor. And it was very interesting because the QP deal that we are faced with now was actually ratified the day before my inauguration. And so we were given a deal that now lasts for the 4 years through my term with no ability really to change that. So I'm just curious, as two members that have sat around this table for many years, why did, particularly in a cottage area like we have, a seasonal area where noise complaints do most often come in on the weekends, we seem to be quite critical of bylaw here, but why were they never working weekends?
Well, that's a good question. And you've been there for 2 years, and I asked you the same question. Why haven't you changed it? But saying that.
Because the contract was
saying that,
ratified.
I'm saying that.
You can't
Saying
change the
that, we
QP
can't go
deal.
back and change things in the past. Why did it not get changed? For the same simple reason, contracts were in place. And you know, and I know very clearly, it's council, not the mayor, who makes those kinds of decisions. And you need 5 votes to have a resolution to pass a contract with any union or any other body that you're dealing with, whether it's a contract for services, contract for construction, you need 5 votes to do that.
My
Staff
council
bring it
never
forward.
passed a
I'm not
contract.
finished. Staff bring it forward. Council deals with it. You need 5 votes around the table. That's nothing new for you or me or Mr. Luke, who was the mayor before you, who you say signed some sort of agreement the day before you were inaugurated. I can't deal with that. And we can't deal with what happened from 2000 when Norfolk County was first brought into being. What we can do is look to the future and try to make things better. And that's what we're attempting to do today.
To be
And on the
clear,
9th, down to you.
to be clear, it is not some sort of contract. The QP agreement is a collective agreement with our union, and we don't just get to open up bargaining at any point in time. And to be very clear, my council never voted on that QP deal. What I'm saying is, in previous times, so when that next negotiation comes up for future councils, I certainly do hope and will commit that when that contract is negotiated during my term, those parameters of the deal will be changed. However, our council never voted on those terms, but previous councils certainly have negotiated those QP deals, for the record.
And I agree with everything you've just said. And I really hope in the future you do deal with it, and you will deal with it if you're there. Having said that, our ambition around this table today is to move things forward, to look to the future. How can we work collaboratively together with bylaw under the umbrella of whatever council direction is given to the staff internally to Norfolk County? Norfolk County has said to us, through staff, 2 bylaws, that's all. They haven't mentioned to us in any correspondence anything about cannabis or anything about vessels on the water. They haven't said that. Right now we're dealing with 2 issues. Parking, and we have a lot of questions about, okay, when, what kind of parking violations, those kinds of things, and noise, okay? We do know from the past there was an issue where the Norfolk County sound meter was given to someone, loaned to someone, and we've never gotten it. The Norfolk County has never gotten it back. So having said that, the question is, okay, so what tools does Norfolk County have or will obtain and provide to the OPP to enforce things such as noise? So these are a lot of questions. I see your hand. And my ambition is not to get into a hissing fight with anyone. That's with an H, Monty. My ambition is to move the agenda forward, hopefully in a collaborative fashion with Norfolk County staff as partners. I saw your hand.
Mr. Trevally, given that this is going to be reported in, I'm sure,
Mr. Chair, please.
in the Simcoe Reformer, in terms of working collaboratively, I couldn't agree with you more. But these constant attacks on myself online, on your Twitter profile, make it very difficult to work collaboratively in this environment. However, that being said, in terms of the sound meter, and the noise bylaw, I've come to learn that in fact the sound meter is not required for noise violations for motorcycles and so on, which is, I'm assuming, in part what we're going to be dealing with as the Police Services Board. So that is actually not a barrier to us moving forward and providing some, I realize we can't direct OPP, but, putting listing our priorities of things that we would like to tackle. So the sound meter is not a barrier at this point.
Good. And you want to get it out in the open. What I do personally, on my personal account, is no one's other business, including yourself. Having said that, I have full respect for the office of mayor, and I've said that to you in an email, and I'll share that email if you wish. I have full respect for the uniform of the officer. I was raised that way in the military. Don't roll your eyes. That's the way I was raised. And I'm telling you, and I was trained that way. So I have respect for the office of the mayor. I was the mayor. I have full respect for Mr. Luke, who was the mayor. I have full respect for you as the mayor. But don't get personal. If you want the media to cover the story other than what we're here today to cover, let's do that. All right? More from around the table, please. Go ahead, Mr. Santos.
Mr. Chair, and to everyone around the table here, this hasn't come on from overnight. This goes back to when Nanny Coke was Nanny Coke. This goes back to the region. If we look back at our history and the regional police force and with the Norfolk OPP, I think what we have to look towards right now and today is how can we make it better? With the noise bylaw and the parking bylaw, that is truly what it's all about. What coulda, shoulda, woulda didn't happen. Well, we're here today, and I believe through your leadership, Mr. Chair, that we can focus on those two issues. With regards to cannabis, as you've mentioned, that's something that can come out with time, and I think it will, and needs to. Now, with regards to these questions or qualms, I think let's just focus on the noise and the parking bylaw and move on, and hopefully next week we can sit around the table with the OPP and with bylaw, and we can draft a pretty good, let's put it this way, communications between the OPP and Norfolk County and bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So, any other comments? Go ahead, Willie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The role as a member of the police board is to have a safe and secure community, and that's where my focus really wants to be. And really, that alone, that's our responsibility. Sometimes when there's disagreements, they go in camera. That's normally how I was born and raised that way. And the last comment I'll make is that peace really isn't when people can all agree. It's when people can respect to disagree. It's only then when you can really play in the same sandbox together. So from my perspective, it's I love disagreement when it's constructive, but I really don't like it when it has an effect. And we have to lead by example. And I'm not comfortable in confrontations that are not for the good of the county and for the area that I serve.
Thank you very much for that. Excuse me. Any other comments, please, around the table before we get into any kind of specific questions that we might want to pose to Norfolk County staff? Mr. Columbus.
Oh, there's two items under discussion here, parking and excessive noise. Is that what we're going to focus on for the rest of the meeting?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, good.
Okay. Excuse me. So dealing with the two bylaws that have been provided to us and are attached to your agenda, the first one we bump into, of course, is to regulate and prohibit excessive noise within the municipality of Norfolk County. Excuse me. And there are a number of definitions that are given there. It goes on for a couple of pages. And it's, as most bylaws, are all listed by alphabetical order. We know historically and most currently that there are some folks that don't like noise of motorcycles. They think they're too loud. There are others who will complain about noise from other origins. Certainly the correspondence with the Police Services Board over the last year relative to noise, the best of my recollection, it has been around motorcycles and predominantly on Friday 13th. We had one complaint, in fact it was a deputation that talked about noise from motorcycles after hours at the Kinsman camping spot. That was a more specific one-off. So I guess the question that may come to mind is, how does the officer or bylaw officer who's responding determine that the noise is excessive? So then you look at the bylaw and you see, well, is there something in here that allows them to make that measurement? Or is it an individual personal decision that is made and the ticket is written, and should it ever be challenged, what's the process then that will be followed? Should it go to court? Because when we talk about either of these bylaws or both of them, there's a follow-on process that must take place. If a citation is written, what is the process then that follows? Hopefully, and I'll take the side of the municipality, hopefully the ticket's paid and we don't have to go to court. And then the monies end up in the POA or in the general coffers of the municipality, and everything's fine from that point forward. We know that isn't always the case. So, having gone around and had comment, can we now get to more specific questions that can be posed? I open it to the table for that. Mr. Santos.
So, Mr. Chair, even before we get to the bylaw, my first question would be this, and I think it's very realistic. I call bylaw, I leave a message, because there is no 24-hour service bylaw hotline or a call. I leave a message stating my neighbor has excessive noise and I want someone to call me back. So we give it 5 minutes, we give it 10 minutes, we give it half an hour, we give it an hour. My question is, will bylaw call me back? Because is it a priority? To me, it would be. The question is it to bylaw? And one would think yes. So even before we get to this point of looking at the exemptions and what we classify noise or excessive noise, my question is, do we have the resources in place to fulfill these two bylaws? Because honestly speaking, I mean, I've lived here all my life and I'm 51 years of age. When I call bylaw, you leave a message. If someone picks up, good for you. But by the time that officer or the county employee deals with the issue, might be a day, might be 2 days, and my concern is no longer valid. So that's my question, Mr. Chair.
So to try to phrase this, you're looking at the immediacy of the response? Okay?
We have a priority system. I mean, when we speak of with the OPP, there's the priority 1, 2, 3, or 4. Some people dial 911 when it's not an emergency. Some people call the 1-888 number, or they call the detachment. So there's 3 options. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Willie, and then Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess maybe my question does go to, through you, Mr. Chair, just how it's been handled in the past. And if it has been much of an issue, maybe the mayor and the councilor might have some thoughts on that. Like some of these things may be very minor. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to impose upon the two members of council that are here, the mayor and Councilor Columbus, to provide us with any sort of solutions today. I really just want to go through the process and see what are the questions that we will pose to staff, and then let county deal with those questions and get back to us with the objective of being, is there a priority system? Let's ask that question. We know that if a call comes in to the detachment, either through 911 or the 426 number or the 1-888 number, the police will do what they can within their priority system. So to take your example, Mr. Santos, your neighbor's noise might not get addressed if it's the OPP that are responding, because they have other things to deal with that are perhaps more important in their hierarchy of things. So what happens then, the noise stops, and then the officer finally shows up when the priorities are cleared, and I don't hear any noise, sir. What's the issue? Type of thing. So immediacy, priority systems are good questions. We know from this side, from the PSB and the police, they do have a priority system. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's paramount for the residents of Norfolk County, if we're looking at parking and noise bylaw, they're going to want a priority system, and they're going to want service. The taxpayer is going to want to contact an employee of Norfolk County, and they're great employees. The point becomes is who and how, because the bylaw department handles numerous, and we're just talking about two issues here, but noise and parking seem to be a major issue during the summer with parking down in Long Point, noise, parties.
Thank you. Mike Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, after hours, it's usually the OPP that have responded, and all they can do, because the party may be over or the dog may quit barking, it's always hours later, so all they can do is tell the dog owner or the homeowner that there's been a complaint. And what I would expect is that they continue to monitor. If it happens over and over and over again, then they can keep a closer eye on it. But George mentioned a bit there's the party noise that counselors get calls over the weekends, where people are having bonfires in their back cottage yard. And so there's the barking dog situation. And again, what's normally told by the bylaw department is to keep a record of when that dog's barking, so that when the charge is laid, they've got evidence to go to court, and that's how that works. But normally, after hours, up until the pandemic issue where bylaw officers were on call for most of the weekends, that went to the OPP in the past.
Thank you. So trying to distill what's been said over the last 5 minutes, we're looking to get information about any kind of priority system. We're looking to get information about any kind of availability, capability, or capacity to respond immediately to the issue. We're looking at, and more strategically, what particular times of day, which days does Norfolk County want the police to be the enforcement agency? Is it after 5 o'clock, every day, all day on the weekends, holidays? Get clarity on those issues. What's the timelines, time frames within which they want the OPP to be the enforcement agency? If bylaw is, say, on a Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock and a complaint comes into the OPP, how is that dealt with? So I think the timeframes are very important in this respect, and then the capacity and capability to respond, recognizing certainly on the policing side there are priorities that they will deal with before they go to a noise complaint. Any other areas of question, Mr. Santos?
Just to add, Mr. Chair, and to everyone around the table, then my question also is due diligence. So if these calls come in, who's recording them? Who's keeping track? And I'm not looking at a budget saying, okay, well, bylaw, you know, they're X amount of hours and OPP X amount of hours and here's the rate. If we're giving this to bylaw and they've already been dealing with this for years and years, my question becomes is if it goes to court, I would like to know that 7 calls were placed in the last 10 years to that property, whereas that individual, if they appeal it, that at least it's a question of the job was done properly, and Norfolk County bylaw is looked upon as not only doing their due diligence, but following what the taxpayer requires.
So again, to try to distill that, you're looking at a reporting mechanism and a statistical base of some sort, so that either bylaw or the OPP will have access and say, well, this is a problem property, or this is a problem area. And okay, so we can pose that question for sure. You know, what are the expectations of Norfolk County relative to building in? We get our statistics monthly from the OPP, and there's a portion in there that deals with bylaws. And I won't guess, but I suspect strongly that those statistics don't go into any other database other than the OPP database. Yeah, that's where you're going?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And also, I mean, Norfolk County has numerous resources. I mean, the OPP are one. But when I refer to the resources, I mean, we have our own court system. It's a provincial court system. So then my question becomes is there one officer or several officers that are going to be trained in representing Norfolk County and their cases to provincial court? It's just not a simple write a ticket. There's more to this than the average person understands.
Absolutely, and that gets back to your earlier statement about process, and once that citation is written, what's the follow-on? How will those numbers be fed into some sort of database for statistical purposes, and let's use the vernacular, a heads up on the next call that comes in on that property or that issue. Mr. Columbus.
You know, it might be other communities, other municipalities are having these same parking issues, noise issues, and it might be worthwhile looking at how they are handling these situations. And, you know, maybe the prescription's already been written somewhere on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I did a bit of reaching out, as it were, to some of the Zone 4 members that surround us, particularly Haldeman, Elgin, Brant. And what I find, particularly in those areas, is that the OPP, whether the contract is exclusive or inclusive, the OPP are predominantly used for bylaw after hours, holidays and weekends. Yeah, it's just, and it always has been that way. You know, we can go back to the question that the mayor posed. Why wasn't it changed back then? Well, that's just 444 municipalities in Ontario, mostly the rural ones, use their police force after hours, holidays, weekends, for enforcement of bylaw. And even though the contract may be generalized as we see it, and no, we don't do bylaws, that's historically the way it's done. The municipality pays for that police service, and I suspect my conversations with at least 3 others, the expectation is that the police will do those things. Yeah. But we can raise that, Mr. Columbus, if you want, with Zone 4, and just see what the more broadly applied approach is, if you wish.
I do believe that would be a good investment of our time.
I'm not sure that we'll get all the answers by the 9th, but I can certainly compile the responses that I have had already, reaching out to the chairs of the others that are neighbors to us. Mr. Santos.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here. What we basically have to do is just fine tune. But I want to be realistic here. The taxpayer wants to make a phone call, wants to talk to someone, and wants that issue dealt with. Is it going to be dealt with within that half hour, an hour? Remains to be seen. But I think the leadership has to come from the Police Services Board, Mr. Chair, to Norfolk County. It's very easy for us to say, well, you know what, we're going to have the OPP not look after bylaws and the noise complaints and parking. We'll put it on to Norfolk County bylaw. But the structure's not there. Not that I know of or that I've heard of. I'd like to see it there, but that's up to council, Mr. Chair, and I think we need to make it clear on those points that we've prioritized and give that information to bylaw, or sorry, to council to deal with. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Mayor.
Yeah, just in our staff's defense, I would like to say that, you know, we have hired a new head of bylaw. We're making changes. We're moving that over to the clerk's department. We've created a new position for Jim to stay on. You know, he's retired from OPP. Change doesn't just happen overnight. I think we're really lucky to have Mr. Milson. I think he's only been here, you know, for a short period of time. He started in the middle of a pandemic with, you know, a lot of other bylaw issues to deal with than, you know, noise and parking at that point in time. That wasn't our top priority. And so, you know, I think that you have to also say we've created, you know, under Jason's leadership, you know, a one-window customer service. There's changes that are being made internally right now to make it easier for people to have one phone number to call the county. You know, we've got a new head of bylaw that's taking these steps, but again, it doesn't just happen overnight. But I just feel that, you know, with Mr. Milson in this new role, you know, I think the best thing about him is that because he was, you know, retired from OPP, he understands the inner workings between OPP and Norfolk County bylaw, and he was motivated to take on this position because of his years of experience with OPP here and seeing the dysfunction between bylaw and OPP. So I don't think we could have anybody better suited to the job right now to be leading that team. And, you know, again, I just feel that this constant criticism at staff right now, actually, I think they're working hard and they're trying to piece things back together.
Criticism from this table?
No, you know, you hear it often. You hear it in the community and so on with bylaw, and I agree that it has been a challenge, and we have noted that, you know, and that's why, again, I just think it's important for the public to know, you know, we have made significant changes here, and Jim is, if Mr. Milson can't do it, then I don't think then nobody can do it. But, you know, I think it's important to understand those changes that have taken place.
I saw your hand, George.
So, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, it's not criticism. I want to make something very clear. It's working together. And I think the Police Services Board, we're not here to dictate. We're here to basically improve the security and the safety of the residents of Norfolk County. Our concern basically comes down to the fact that noise and parking were basically a priority and have been a priority for numerous years, and lately there's been a lot of complaints. So my understanding with the new position that Mr. Milson has come in, that was a temporary position because of COVID. So I'm not sure if his job will continue on, Madam Mayor, but and hopefully it will. The question here that we're posed with in our agenda basically deals with noise and bylaw, and parking bylaw. So ultimately, no criticism. We're working together. We're wanting some change. And like I said, I've talked to numerous individuals in the community, and what we're looking for is teamwork. That's all.
Did I see your hand, Mike? No? Okay. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not saying just, it wasn't really so much at you, George, it was just more at criticisms that I hear in the community, and I just wanted to be reinforced for the PSB that they are trying to establish those relationships and they are trying to take active steps. In terms of the parking piece, I'm not sure how much everybody is aware, but there's also a component in the budget to engage in a parking study across the county, because we also understand actively that there are parking challenges. So regardless of the outcome of today, I'm not really entirely sure still of what our goal is with this, but what I do know is that we are looking at a parking study across the county to determine whether, parking meters should be in Long Point and other options that we have to be able to look for changes for next summer to make it better for people.
Thank you for that. And I think we're encouraged by the fact that council is seized with the issues. Our role, to go back to my introductory remarks, is to see what we have any kind of confusion or need clarification on, what questions or comments we can pose on the 9th to bring that clarity, to make sure that legally, contractually, the OPP do what they're asked to do. And if Norfolk County is asking us to look at noise and parking, then a number of questions pop up. Do they want a uniformed officer of the OPP writing parking tickets in downtown Port Dover or anyplace else? We know from history that bylaw in the summer usually hired up a couple of resources, whether from community college or other places, to attend to parking along the waterfront, whether it was Long Point exclusively or Long Point, Turkey Point, Port Dover. So, those are the sort of the first questions that pop in my mind. What's the time frames within which, if any time frame, is it always, or is it specific when you want the bylaw enforcement to be done by the police? The single window concept is a great one. The feedback I get from the police is they will get a call, they will refer that individual to that one number, and then an hour later, the call comes back into the detachment for whatever reason, who knows. And then the police feel somewhat obligated, and that's why we see the statistics over the last period of time under bylaw. So they feel obligated, so okay, well, we'll go type of thing if we have an officer available. So it's clearing out the underbrush, making things more workable, and as stated by a number around the table, it's all about collaboration and cooperation, and it's do the best for Norfolk County, because at the end of the day, they're paying the freight, right, Mr. Columbus?
Well, the one thing that might help both these situations, and primarily parking, is to increase these fines significantly. And I think that would, it's about enforcement, I guess, then. And if you, some people on the weekend, they'll park at Long Point and they get a small fine and they'll leave their vehicle there forever. And they'll come back the following week and do the same thing, or Turkey Point or Port Dover, because our fines aren't high enough, I think. In the big cities, they pay heavier fines, and I think that would alleviate a lot of the parking issues.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think we all understand very clearly that the writing of a ticket, a citation, doesn't solve the parking problem. The vehicle is still there. You can write 6 tickets, the vehicle is still there. If the ambition is to solve the parking problem, that is, a vehicle is parked where it's not supposed to be or longer than it's supposed to be, then there's another solution to solve that problem rather than just writing a ticket. And that is to move the vehicle. But those things are not within the police jurisdiction unless they become the enforcement agency, and the bylaw allows for those things to take place. So, again, our ambition today is to, what questions do we want to pose, what comments do we want to make when we meet on the 9th? And to Mr. Columbus's comment, are the penalties great enough to, to assist in solving the problem. Further from around the table, on noise. We- Any questions or comments relative to excessive noise as included in the title, whether it's parties? And again, we have seen, and members of council will recall this, I'm sure, deputations coming forward on any new development. It's, oh no, it's going to be dust, there's going to be noise, there's going to be this, that, and the other. And then it's dealt with at the council level. We also know that there were deputations in front of council that for a particular property that is rents out rooms, and the neighbors are complaining about parties going on the property, and the police respond. So rather than get granular, I really want to try and stay as strategic as possible. You know, if you want the police that carry a certain cachet because they're in uniform and have a cruiser and all the things that come with it, to enforce these bylaws, what are the timelines, timeframes? What tools do you give them? Do they have the citation books for local bylaw? You know, those are the sort of questions we have to ask. I saw your hand, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is, at this stage of the game, has anyone actually challenged these bylaws over the last 3 years? Has there been any challenge with the provincial offenses or the staff itself?
I can't answer that. I have no information for you.
The reason I ask that question, it would be imperative to know, because if we're making changes now and we're allocating our ideas and hopefully resources, one would think that we could, you know, make those changes now instead of later.
I don't disagree with you. However, we're not about to make any changes as PSB. Totally within the jurisdiction of staff to propose those and council to approve those. Okay? See your hand, Madam Mayor?
Oh, I was just gonna, so we have a bylaw appeals committee that, so anybody can come forward and challenge that. And until, I always remember at our orientation day, when people were selecting what committees they wanted to be on, I remember that committee was one they said, I don't think we've had a bylaw appeals in, you know, they never meet kind of thing. And I know for the couple counselors that are on there, I think they have met probably, well, I don't know, every other month maybe over the last 2 years. I don't recall any on noise and so on. It's been more on the tree cutting bylaw and animal care control bylaw and those types of things. So, but that would be the mechanism that something is challenged.
In fact, bylaw appeals agendas are posted online, Norfolk County website. In my recollection, most appeals related to property issues, where a notice was given to someone to cut the grass and take the weeds out or clean up the yard, whatever it might be. And most of those appeals come forward and say, oh, I'm going to do it, I'm trying to do it, but I need a bit more time to do it. And in my recollection, I've never seen probably more than 2 a year that ever come forward in those regards. But they are posted online. You can look at them. Go ahead, Mr. Columbus.
The other one that was quite common years ago was somebody was going to have a wedding, and they had a curfew for when the noise would stop. They wanted it extended to 1 o'clock in the morning, and it would come, and the appeals committee would ensure that the proper things were in place, and the neighbors were notified. So that was the other common one.
And again, that's a small but important point. You know, how does that information get fed after hours to the police to say that this is a legitimate meeting and they have authority to go beyond 11 o'clock or whatever it might be? Did I see your hand, Willie?
I think maybe Mike answered my question, and so there might be other examples I'm just thinking it through, like, for example, if it's fireworks, they need authorization, so somebody gives, is there a permit that needs to be done for?
There is a fireworks bylaw, I just don't
Yeah,
know how it reads.
okay,
but
no, I see what you're
There's a
saying.
bylaw that covers fireworks sales
Yeah.
and that type of
Yeah, anything outside the guidance of this bylaw would need, let's say, an exemption from the 11 o'clock to some other time for extra noise. That would, there's a committee in place for that, I guess, right? Or a process in place for people getting exemptions. Yep.
Thank you. So just a quick recap as to where we are at this point. Things that were raised around the table and spoken to, a single point of contact for bylaw, or whether it's Norfolk County, then internally through that single window, it's dispatched accordingly. And after hours, if that single point of contact isn't in operation, how do the police deal with that? If it is in operation, fine, great. The capacity and capability to respond on an immediate issue, premise, parking, won't jump to that for a moment. Knowing that the OPP do have other priorities, so it gets back to the capacity and capability to respond to issues that are under the bylaw. Hours of operation, is it all the time, or is it within specific times? And a tracking mechanism or reporting mechanism for these things, so that both parties, bylaw and the OPP, can share that information as to any recurring trouble point. Have I missed anything from around the table? Okay. Another issue, and it was spoken to briefly, and that is any tools. So do the police have the citation books that they need for bylaw enforcement? When we talk about noise, is a sound meter or other device useful or necessary? If it goes to court as the follow-on process, how do they prove that the noise was excessive other than yeah, those are the ones I had. Mayor.
I guess the bigger complaint I think that we see coming in and is starting to become an increasing issue is the noise from, and it's not really captured in this, but this is where I think our direction from the PSB to OPP is the noise from, excessive noise from motorcycles and so on. So like you just saw, they've started targeting that down in Niagara on the Lake and in those areas. So, I think that, again, that's something that we need to do here. It's just a matter of, making that as one of the priorities, I think, for OPP to start doing that, because it's getting worse, not better, as the days go on, and that's a huge frustration of residents all over the county, but particularly Turkey Point, Port Dover.
Yeah, thank you. And here again, I've been following along other jurisdictions, particularly in the GTA, where they have had targeted programs. And when an officer hears what he or she believes is excessive noise, they'll pull that vehicle over, and lo and behold, they will discover the vehicle does not meet the road criteria because the muffler's been removed. So it's not so much that they're going to ticket them for the noise as is they're going to get the ticket for not having a muffler or catalytic converter on the vehicle, or some aftermarket device that is not authorized by law. So you have the indication, which says to the officer, oh, I better look at this vehicle. They pull them over and said, you have a very loud vehicle going on here. I'm going to look underneath this thing, and lo and behold, there's no muffler. So one issue leads to another in this case. Now, motorcycles, is pretty apparent because there they are right there. You don't have to look under them. You're looking at the vehicle. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, I'm just a little confused. So we have a noise bylaw, and so you would suggest that we ask the OPP with regards to motorcycles? Because ultimately, I understand noise bylaw is under one bylaw, so that would encompass the motorcycles and/or vehicles. That's what I'm thinking. If we're taking the OPP and saying, okay, look, we have a noise bylaw, we're going to leave it up to our bylaw enforcement officers. Now we're thinking, well, no, maybe we should change it back. I'm a little concerned, or just want to ask that question to the mayor, Mr. Chair.
And
I don't believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe our bylaw has the authority to stop a vehicle on the road that's falling under this Highway Safety Act. And that's where those tickets for mufflers and so on can be laid, those charges can be laid. So that's where I personally see a disconnect. Why is OPP not, doing targeted enforcement days like we're seeing in other communities, for noise reduction? I don't, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that it's not so much it's that a charge is laid under the bylaw, but in some municipalities, they have created, but I think it's slightly different. So that's something to look at. I think that's maybe a question, like, again, as from the PSB to OPP. It's the other way.
yeah, and I've seen nothing in the bylaw or any kind of reading that I've done that allows a municipal bylaw officer to enforce the Highway Traffic Act. They're not a peace officer, per se. Right?
The reason I ask is, how do you educate the public? So we're referring to noise and noise bylaw. One would think that motorcycle that keeps going around the cul-de-sac, do you call the OPP or do you call bylaw?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that you face with bylaws is, like you say, by the time you put a phone call in, it's one of the reasons, you saw in Quebec, provincially, they were the first ones when they brought the mask bylaw in at a provincial level, not at a local level. They put it on the businesses there. So you had the option. You put it on the business or you put it on the individual. To be able to receive a phone call that John Smith wasn't wearing a mask at XYZ location, really, how are we to enforce that? You're never going to be able to get somebody there to be able to do it. So the reason in that case why we went and we put it on the businesses was from the idea that if you have a business that is, not complying at all and you're getting repeated complaints of that location not abiding by the rules, then you have an ability to send a bylaw officer down there to have a conversation with that business, right? But to be able to go and hit John Smith, it's impossible to do. So I think it's the same context with noise and with motorcycles. The ability for somebody to call and say, there's a motorcycle with this license plate that's driving around my block. Again, how is OPP going to get there in time to charge the person or bylaw? It's impossible. But what we can do as, the Police Services Board, I think it's the question to OPP. Why aren't they doing, a targeted enforcement day in the summer months? Here, there, Port Dover on a Friday, probably not Friday the 13th, but any other Friday, in Port Dover, a couple of times through the summer. And I think once that message gets out, throughout other communities and so on, just like it did with Niagara on the Lake, people start to get the message. And, they start not coming in the same way that with photo radar traps and so on. You start to get the message that there's targeted, enforcement. But that's what I think that we're not seeing in the community, and what people aren't seeing is, and same thing with speeding as an issue. I can't remember the last time that I've seen an actual, speed trap photo radar situation in Norfolk County. But we spend a lot of money on signs and so on. I don't know. To me, I don't know that that's the effective way to do it. Like, I think that it's our job as the role of the PSB to communicate with OPP that these are the types of things that are our priorities and we would like to see.
Thank you. Mike Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I just Googled policing and noise issues, and there's a few places that have dealt with this noise issue. think Bob Cajun's one of them. This is the Upper Ottawa Valley OPP has listened to local residents and police service boards regarding the excessive and unnecessary noise generated by a small minority of car and motorcycle drivers. Then it goes on to say, the fines for unnecessary noise and improper muffler violations is $110 each. No decibel reading is required for court or a conviction, as officers can determine if the noise is loud enough to issue a ticket. That's what it says. They don't have no monitoring device or anything, so I guess the person, if they think they're under the level, they go to court and the judge rules whether there's a fine or not, so.
Thank you very much. And certainly it goes back to an earlier comment. Is the noise created by the fact that the muffler is either not there or is not the correct, let me put it in a positive, it's not aftermarket or a change. So I'd like to dig into that a little deeper, but I do know there are a number of jurisdictions that have undertaken noise enforcement issues. Most that come to my mind have been in the GTA area. But those are important points, and again, we'll hopefully have a healthy discussion on the 9th around these issues, and the OPP will be present to give us their viewpoints. Just a moment, Mayor. And certainly, I have said these things, and the mayor said them today. You know, we cannot direct the OPP operationally, nor can we intervene in any investigation. But it doesn't prevent us from expressing our desires, expectations. Hence, the PSB has developed and passed a strategic plan for policing. Now we're waiting for the tactical operational plan to come back to us for review from the OPP. Go ahead, Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to apologize. I'm actually going to have to leave the meeting early. I got invited actually onto a call with the federal government over the housing requirements for the temporary foreign worker program. So I'm going to go off to, that starts at 10:30, but I've got a couple phone calls to make first. So thank you.
Yeah, I saw something posted this morning about their willingness to have a discussion. Yeah. So carrying on, in the absence of the mayor, the bylaw under noise, if you go to page 11, or the bylaw, it's actually page 5 of 8 at the top right corner. There are a whole list of exemptions there. And I do recall from history that there was a whole discussion about wind chimes at one point. Around the count. Michael, you laugh.
Yeah, there was, and I just got a wind chime for Christmas, so. I haven't put it up.
Just the lighter side of enforcement, right? But what it does raise is the issue of, you know, something that is available, a normal product, you can buy it, and the desire for some folks to go to excess. You know, but here it says chimes, bells, you know, I'm not sure what the meaning of that is, are exempted. So I just wanted to circle that and raise that issue. But all of the exemptions are there, so I guess the question that can be posed potentially is, are there any other exemptions that we should discuss when we get to the meeting on the 9th? And if you look at the very last one under the exemptions, and this was a punch-in on an amendment coming out of direction from the Ontario government. So, wind power generating facilities. And we all know there's been lengthy discussion around this council table here over the years about that. Mr. Columbus.
There's one that I know came up over the years that's, I don't think is on the list, and it was a flagpole, where the rope on the flagpole kept hitting the metal aluminum stand, eh? And I don't know if it's on here, but it would be something similar to a wind chime, but I would think a flagpole should be exempt, but it certainly disrupted the whole neighborhood, because this individual had about 10 flagpoles on his lawn in Delhi, I recall.
He sold flags, did he not? Yeah. Again, we can pose that question, you know, give us a bit of definition to guide the police in their enforcement activity. If you live in Port Dover or Port Rowan, but mostly Port Dover, on Brown Street, say, up on top of the cliff there, and by the marina, and to Mike's point, all the sailboats and their devices are just clinging and clanging and stuff, you know. Is that an issue? Who knows? It becomes an issue when somebody complains about it. It's really the point. I can't stand that noise. Oh boy, then the process starts. Did I see your?
Yeah, no, just answering the question you posed about exemptions. Like, I know when I read them all over, they all made very much, you know, common sense. It's hard to be able to write everything down, right? And the one with the wind power, my just thought was that the setbacks would hopefully be far enough that it shouldn't pose that kind of something problem. But I don't know for sure in depth, but that was just my thought reading it.
What is noise to you may be music to me. Yeah, exactly. So it really, in a lot of circumstances, is going to be a caution, a warning, you know, turn it down, silence it, whatever it might be, in the first instance, because any bylaw, the objective of which is to bring compliance. That's, you know, I can't think of a bylaw that doesn't have that intent, bring about compliance, whether it's clean yard, property standards, all of those things. It's to bring the complaint into compliance. So historically, the officer arrives and asks the people to keep it quiet. There's a warning that is given, and the discretion is exercised. Go ahead, George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can have all the bylaws we want. What people are going to want is service. So the question ultimately will be, is it the OPP at a cost of X amount an hour, or is it bylaw at a cost of so much an hour? And I mean, we're in some trying times. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to be looking at that dollar figure. And when it goes back to council, ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to. For us as a police services board, I would like to see the optimum service, right? Where the OPP come in and just deal with the issue and move on. But realistically, in these trying times, what I understand is we're going to put these two issues and numerous issues as time go on to bylaw. So I just believe, I mean, there's good footings there, but we need to build on this. And I think it's important that the lines of communication between the OPP, bylaw, and Norfolk County are open. And we heard previously from our mayor, Madam Mayor, is that we have a retired OPP officer. So if that retired OPP officer can open those doors of communication between the OPP, bylaw, and Norfolk County, I think that's ideal. And that's what I think the general public, Mr. Chair, want, is a service. We can nitpick all we want with regards to noise and parking, but what I clearly understand is I make a call, I want service, but they have to pay for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I have two comments I want to make. The first is on page 7 of 8 of the noise bylaw. Again, your top right-hand corner page numbering. And that portion deals with penalties. And I want to go back to the earlier discussion about the Bylaw Appeals Committee. That once a ticket is written, the Bylaw Appeals Committee does not take place, has no jurisdiction. It then goes to the court. So you don't come and say, oh, I got this parking ticket and I want the Bylaw Appeals Committee to take it away. That doesn't happen. They'll have to sign the back, go to the court, and make their argument. And it's the same with any other violation of the bylaw where a ticket is written. Now, if a bylaw officer hands the property owner a notice, a letter saying, we have a complaint, your property is not clean up, or you have too many weeds, or whatever it might be, then the Bylaw Appeals Committee has jurisdiction, but not when a citation or a ticket is written. Okay, that's the first comment. Okay, go ahead, George, sorry.
Mr. Chair, that's a very good comment. One thing I want to make note here to the Police Services Board, and I've noticed this when you go into the city of Hamilton, there are signs that specifically say parking or certain bylaws that have to be adhered to for the people that are from the outside to understand. So I want to make something very clear for the people that are going to be coming in from Toronto, Kitchener, that these bylaws are going to be in place. So we don't have any entrances from the north, the south, or the west or the east advising our tourists or the general public of, let's put it this way, these bylaws. And more so the parking bylaw, because if anyone has driven down Highway number 6, being that it's closed now because of the blockade, the point here is when you pass Binbrook and Highway number 6, there's a clear sign on the right that specifically says there's no parking between, I believe it's 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock for big trucks. There's no parking, and I don't think we have that. So to be fair for the individuals that are coming in to our tourist Norfolk County, the parking bylaw, I think, is important to educate. So there should be some signage coming in the 4 directions, I believe, Mr. Chair. That's my understanding.
Thank you. I too have seen that. It'll be a call by council if they wish to post those types of things. I've seen it posted in some jurisdictions where it said the speed limit is 40 kilometers an hour on every street unless otherwise posted. You know, those kinds of things. But those are all within the jurisdiction of council, so we'll put that as an observation or a question. Certainly under parking, in the winter, snow removal becomes an issue, and is there a bylaw, or is it included in this bylaw, or any amendment to this bylaw, the fact that you're blocking snow removal, and therefore your vehicle will be towed away rather than just ticketed, or ticketed and towed away. So those kinds of things. But again, strategically, we need clarification on when they want the police to do the work, what tools are they going to provide, or have they provided already to do that kind of work. Understanding that the police have other priorities, so they certainly may be very different from the priorities of bylaw officers. And if an outcome of the discussion is that there are amendments required to the bylaw, understanding that the process then is staff have to prepare those amendments and present them to council in committee, usually for discussion, and then subsequently approved by council. So there's a process that will take time. It shouldn't interfere with the police enforcing what exists at the present time. Won't sit back and wait for any kind of amendment to take place, but certainly recognizing that the discussion may raise some issues that require amendments to the bylaw. Anything else from around the table? Mr. Columbus.
Well, I recall in the downtown Simcoe here, there was a commissionaires hired to enforce parking. And should we be investigating the use of commissionaires? I was just going to Google it now here and see what municipalities do, but I just bring that up for discussion.
Yeah, the issue of other bodies enforcing bylaws, much as students are hired in the summer and do enforcement, they are sworn in as bylaw officers or enforcement officers. The Canadian Corps of Commissioner and other security agencies do provide that kind of service. Again, they must be sworn in to enforce that particular bylaw or any other particular bylaws. In the case of Simcoe, it was the BIA that hired that company, the Canadian Corps of Commissioner, to do that. It was not Norfolk County. Certainly, their rate of pay is significantly less than an OPP officer, and maybe less than, and I suspect less than a bylaw officer, an employee of the Norfolk County. So that's an option that we can pose the question: have you looked at that option? Because it does not have to be restricted to the community of Simcoe. You can bring on board a security agency such as the Canadian Corps Commissioner and say, okay, we'll empower you to enforce the parking bylaws across all of Norfolk. Usually they have their own vehicles, and that's written into the contract. But yeah, there are other contract options that are available. So a question would be, a reasonable question would be, have you looked at other options rather than a fully badged and uniformed officer doing this kind of work? And the flexibility of a security agency doing that is they're not restricted to certain hours either. You can dictate the hours of the contract. Certainly my experience working in Ottawa, we have security agencies, including the Canadian Corps Commissioner, working 24/7, 365 days a year. So, and it's a viable option. Is it any less expensive? Who knows? I would suspect it very well could be. Yeah. Thanks for that, Mike. Anything else from around the table? If not, what I will do is work with Owen, capture what we've had today in terms of discussion, put the questions in some semblance of reasonable order and importance, and we'll get them out to you and to the OPP. And again, stating that the objective today is to get those comments, questions, observations in preparation for the 9th, when hopefully we can then make the required changes to the contract, which is a legal binding document, and move forward from there to work collaboratively and cooperatively, as you've said, George, to give the citizens of Norfolk the best possible service that we can. And that's always been our objective around this table. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is very important, so I commend you for that, and I would hope that this information then is disseminated to the committee, and then on the 9th, hopefully we could further it and make it happen, because now's the time to make this happen, no doubt. Thank you.
Yeah, and with your permission, what I'd certainly like to do, and I think has a great advantage, is not just circulate it to ourselves and the OPP, but circulate it to Ms. Budis and Jim Milson and to the clerk, so that they're prepared when we go to the meeting on the 9th with any kind of response.
You're referring to legal counsel? Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, for sure.
Yeah, bylaw comes under her at the present time. As I've been informed, January 1st, it becomes the jurisdiction of the clerk's office. Mike, I saw your hand.
No, I see 5 days ago, Niagara Falls hires enforcement commissioners to enforce parking bylaws. Believe it or not, they pay $15 an hour, and they will supply you with a mask.
Yeah, if you haven't interested and you want to go online and look at the Canadian Corps Commissioner, they have a royal blessing. Their patron is the Governor General of Canada. They were established following the First World War to give work to veterans. They've since expanded that mandate. In fact, I did a study on them as part of federal government requirements in terms of we had so much work and they could not supply all the staff, so we did a study on what private security might look like to replace some of those or to use private security in addition to the Canadian Corps Commissioner, which gets first option. So yes, it's a viable option. The business case has to be made. You know, is it less expensive? Is it more effective? If you want to take the example of what happened here in the community of Simcoe, you know, there was always a discussion about, well, the tickets that are written don't pay for the wages. Oh, wait a minute. Does it work that way with bylaw? You expect that to be a revenue neutral or revenue maker? Same with the police. You know, you don't look at it in that fashion. You look at it in terms of, is the enforcement of the bylaw at the place you want it to be, and is it effective, and is it really what the citizens are doing? Again, I can reflect back that working with the BIA in Simcoe, that they were the ones, because they hired the Canadian Corps Commissioner, they were the ones who adjudicated. So somebody would get a ticket, and of course the age-old argument, well, I was only there for 5 minutes, well, you know, type of thing, but it was their decision over there, somebody, to say, okay, well, we'll forgive that ticket. Can that happen? I don't know. George, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more of a in-house versus contracting, only because our citizens of Norfolk prefer to know Tom, Dick, or Harry, or Susie. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to a budget. There's no doubt in my mind. But I just want to bring that out to everyone's attention, because, you know, the question becomes, is the OPP, they're parachuted in. I would disagree with that, because a lot of the OPP officers that I deal with and that are in our community, a good portion of them not only live here, but were raised here. So I think it's important that we keep this clear. Bylaw, with regards to the noise and parking, my view would be in-house versus contracting. But then that's my view, and that's up to council, Mr. Chair, but I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on the table? Mr. Sonnenberg, you have any questions? Thank you very much. Absolutely. Yeah. You ask, you shall receive, sir. If there's nothing else from around the table, I'll accept the motion to adjourn this special meeting. Mr. Santos, Mr. Van Houten, all in favor? Thank you. We're adjourned.